So for this incident, it was extremely chaotic. I know people saw the scene. There was a car that was flipped over. There were two victims sitting on a rear porch on Ridgeway when two dark cars pull up into a vacant lot. Occupants begin actually shooting through a fence at these individuals, the first two victims, and that's when these first two victims were shot. These offending vehicles then flee the scene. The third and fourth victims were actually driving towards the area when they saw what was occurring, and they attempted to either drive past or kind of flee the area. A separate group of males on that scene began to shoot at that vehicle. That's what caused the vehicle to lose control and flip over, and when those two males exited the vehicle and began running, the group on the street continued to shoot at them. As I mentioned, this unintended target, the fifth victim, was in his father's car, stopped at a nearby stop sign when he was shot. It has nothing to do with the incident. So for this incident, there were multiple shooters in these two dark vehicles that initiated the original shooting in the alley, and then the second group of shooters on Ridgeway that shot at at victims 3 and 4 when they were driving past and trying to flee the area. The last incident that took place last night was on the 22nd of July, just before midnight at 1647 North LaSalle in the 18th District at a gas station. And for this incident, we have a victim that's 27 years of age with a gunshot wound to the chest in critical condition. We have a victim, a female victim who's 26 years of age with a gunshot wound to the ankle. We have a male white Hispanic victim who has 2 gunshot wounds to the left thigh in stable condition. This victim was actually an employee of the bus. And then we have another employee of the bus who was the bus security, who is a male Hispanic, who also has a gunshot wound to the foot in good condition. And we have a fifth victim who's 24 years of age, gunshot wound to the right forearm in good condition. Sixth victim, 29 years of age, gunshot wound to the left arm in good condition. And then we also have an unintended target here who was in the gas station who suffered a graze wound to the groin area in good condition. That person was in a vehicle while the gas was being pumped. There was an 8th victim who showed up at the hospital with some sort of graze wound, and detectives are working now to see if that victim suffered a graze wound or possibly suffered injury from glass. They left the hospital before we were able to talk to them. So for this incident, it was a party bus who pulls up into this area to use the restroom, and while this party bus is in the area, there's 3 vehicles that pull up and obviously are targeting victims of this party bus because they all shoot in the direction of these victims. And as I mentioned, the 2 employees of the bus suffer gunshots as well. All 3 of these vehicles then flee the scene. And once again, we are working with all the cameras, and we're back at the gas station today to get more video and to try to track some of these vehicles down. There was information that was put out that one of the vehicles had a stolen license plate on it, which was verified, which obviously makes it a little more difficult and complicated for the investigation for the detectives. But regardless, the detectives are actively investigating all these incidents, but right now these are open and ongoing investigations at this time. So,
before I come back for my comments, I want to ask Pastor James Brooks from Harmony Community Church to come up with a few words.
I'm Pastor James Brooks from Harmony Community Church and Lawndale Christian Health Center in North Lawndale. First, I'd like to just tell you about North Lawndale and how special it is. It's special to me, first of all, because my family moved to North Lawndale from the South in the 1950s, and we've been there ever since. I'm a resident of North Lawndale. I love the people of North Lawndale. And so, in response, my remarks, I just want to say 2 things. Number 1 is that we have some great people in North Lawndale doing some great things. I know that, you hear the bad stuff that happens, but really there are a lot of great things going on in North Lawndale. Grassroots organizations such as Boxing Out Negativity, and then the Lawndale Legal Center, just to name a couple. And there are numerous of peoples and organizations doing some wonderful things to make North Lawndale a wonderful place to live. That's why I'm there. But number two, I just want to bring out, we need to come together in times like this. It's not a time to point fingers and point blame, but it's time to work together as a community, work together with our 10th District Police that are doing a phenomenal job, and Area 4 in trying to keep us safe. We need the community to help us. We need everybody. Yes, everybody. It's all of our responsibility to step out and say something. The objective is clear. We want to keep our babies safe. They deserve a right to live. We can't wait. You know, Dr. King lived in Lawndale in 1966, from January 66 to November 66. And one thing Dr. King said, he said, what affects one directly affects us all indirectly. So we all, Chicago, we all have a responsibility to speak out if we know something. Thank you for this time.
Just a few comments before we open it up for questions. Number one, I just want to echo what Pastor Brooks said about we need the community to speak up. Many of the victims of each of the shootings that we did follow-up investigative information on are not cooperating. They're not forthcoming with information, which makes it much more difficult to solve these cases. And part two of that is when you are not forthcoming, the community is silent with what information they do know about these offenders, the offenders get more emboldened. They feel like they got away with something and they are encouraged to do it again. And we see this cycle of violence that starts and then retaliation and then you start the back and forth. I would just say this one thing about not only the 10th District officers, but many of the officers in our community safety team who all responded as these events unfolded to protect the people of Chicago that live in the Lawndale area, these officers risking everything to stand in between what would be further violence. Without regard for their own safety, our officers run toward danger, run toward bullets, without any regard. Otherwise, we would see much more violence when we have these types of incidents. Even though this seems just extraordinarily tragic with the multiple victims, these offenders don't stop until officers are present because they fuel the street justice with retaliation after retaliation after retaliation. And our forward presence tonight, tomorrow night, the weekend is critical to continuing to pursue justice for the victims today and in other incidents that we as police officers have to stand guard in these communities when they have these types of incidents where it's targeted, people are not cooperating who are victims, which signals to us we want revenge and we don't want police solving this case because we want revenge. We want to retaliate. We don't want you taking them to jail. That signals to us when you don't cooperate, when you're silent, that you prefer street justice. And I will just say this, street justice is never ending. The appetite for revenge is never satisfied. It only harms. It only ruins your community. And we need the community to step forward. Now, we are in a battle for the heart and soul of some of our communities. And now is the time to speak up. And with that, I'll take questions. Yes. I don't want to step on the announcements that's forthcoming from the Attorney General. We'll let that play out this afternoon. It's only a few more hours, so we can wait for the Attorney General to announce that structure. We did announce our team where we're going after gun traffickers. We believe there's a threefold obligation that we have. Obviously, we need to be present and patrol and deploy resources based on data to try and prevent whatever crime we can prevent with our presence. We also have an obligation to arrest offenders and bring them to justice. And we do that, and we advocate strongly for the victim. You've heard me repeatedly talk about offenders need to be held more accountable. But we also have this effort that we need strategy around gun trafficking, how the guns are getting, the flow of guns, how they're getting to Chicago for these offenders to use. And we need to use whatever legal statutes that we have in place, whether that's state and or federal, to pursue the highest consequence for the people trafficking guns to these violent offenders. And we've dedicated 50 officers, just as I announced a few days ago, to be involved on the front end of how guns get to Chicago in the hands of violent offenders so that we can hold them accountable and stem the tide of the flow of guns to these violent people. Yes. No. No. We have to be relentless, and we can't. One thing, we're not going to ever quit on this community. We believe in the people of Chicago, and we don't want to paint everyone with a broad brush. There are people not associated with crime that live in these communities, that contribute to society in a positive way, that do things to help young people make better decisions. So let's not paint with a broad brush. I'm carving out this element of the community that wreaks havoc. They terrorize people. Many are not even from the neighborhood. They come to mete out their violence, their revenge, their retaliation, their street justice, and then they leave for community members like Pastor Brooks to pick up the pieces. So again, let's not paint this with a broad brush to say these communities won't come. I think our role is to stand here, and I think your role as media is obviously to be adversarial toward us, but it's also to carry a message to these communities that the police officers need the community, that being silent perpetuates the violence that occurs because the retaliation is never ending. I think that message needs to be a top line in your articles and in your reporting at the top of the newscast, not at the bottom or lost on the editing room floor. We want these messages that we're using on our platform every time we have this type of thing to change the communication dynamic with the community. And many people from the community are listening to mainstream media, print media, TV media, on how you tell these stories. That's why it's important. Don't paint the whole community with a broad brush. It's important for you not to do that as media. And it's important for you to convey the message that we, police officers, need the community. We need the community to come forward. We're much more effective when the community speaks up and gives us information to be able to solve some of these violent crimes so we can hold these offenders accountable. Yes? I'll pass it on to Dean Hand to kind of go through the details because some are employees of the party bus. So let me just have him to kind of talk through that for the party bus. Thanks.
Sure. So obviously, as we mentioned too, that there's, it's still extremely active investigation. The detective who, originally went out on the scene of the incident with other detectives, he's still working right now. So the answer is many of the individuals who are targeted are not cooperating with the police at this time. With that said, detectives will, wait till hopefully cooler heads prevail. We will constantly re-interview people. As the superintendent mentioned, we have 2 employees of the bus, and that's, where we receive a lot of information. So the individuals are targeted are not very cooperative with the assigned detectives at this time. but that doesn't mean that, you know, that they won't be in the future. But right now, they're not cooperating. No, so we don't have that yet, so I don't like to speculate on that. But we do know that based upon the information and based upon the, you know, some of the video information we have, that the individuals, you know, in the party bus who were exited, who were going to the bathroom, specifically this party bus is targeted by those offenders. Correct, and I think the soup went through that, and it's something that unfortunately with the gang-on-gang violence, the group-on-group violence, it's nothing new, and as the superintendent mentioned, it's an extremely small segment of these communities, right? So as the pastor mentioned, the larger segment are the people who get up and go to work every day and don't want this violence, but that is correct. So the individuals that were targeted and the individuals who were shot are not cooperating with the police at this time. We had a couple unintended, you know, victims, and we spoke to them, and they're cooperating, but right now, we don't have cooperation from the people who are specifically targeted.
Mm-hmm.
Said that they are not.
So I promised my comms director that I wouldn't become a White House press secretary today on this announcement. I would defer and allow the Attorney General and the local ATF special agent in charge to go further in their discussions with the media about the strike force, and then we'll be glad to come back and talk about how this will work and enhance our capabilities, which I believe it will.
I presume you could.
Yes.
And if this.
It's more than that, but again, I'll defer to the Attorney General for further announcements on further details beyond what was released last night. Any other last questions? Really last question? Yes. I believe in reform. I've consistently said whatever the council and mayor agrees to as it relates to this negotiation, when I walked in the door, that we'll be cooperative and work with the group whichever way the final negotiations ended. And now we know how, and we are consistent with, we believe that reform is good for policing. It has the potential to build trust with the communities. Some of this not cooperating that we've been talking about is about not trusting us. So anything that can help us build trust is a good thing in solving crime, as well as, you know, relationships with those in the community that obviously want input on policies and other aspects of policing. We think if you're a police leader and you're not an advocate of reform, you're in the wrong business. One last question. Go ahead. We don't have any further. It's all preliminary. We have to review video from both private and any of our city-wide video pods. We don't have license plates. We don't have descriptions yet, but it's still early. Our detectives worked throughout the night. They're still on scene, so we have more to discover in the future as it relates to video, but it will be helpful if people in the community came forward with additional information about who these offenders are. Thank you all very much.